Russia has released footage of the site where the private jet carrying the head of the Wagner mercenary group crashed. Yevgeny Prigozhin and other top officers from the military company were on the plane when it went down shortly after taking off from Moscow. Russian media reports 10 bodies were found by rescuers. They also cite sources inside Wagner who confirm Prigozhin is among the dead. His supporters claim the plane was deliberately brought down. However, Russian authorities say the cause of the crash is under investigation. The crash comes just months after Prigozhin staged a failed mutiny that challenged Putin's authority. Well, for more on this, we are joined by former Defense Minister Peter MacKay. Always great to chat with you, Peter. You know, when this story was breaking yesterday, and I interviewed Major General David Fraser, one of the things that is quite clear is that Russia controls the information that's coming out of that country, and obviously we might not ever find the facts of what exactly happened. What was your reaction to the news yesterday, and what do you think might have happened here?
Well, frankly, not much of a surprise. I think Yevgeny Prigozhin has been a marked man since that failed coup attempt that you referenced. And the reality is that this is, again, an example of the brutality that goes on inside Russia, as witnessed every day during this illegal invasion in Ukraine. But that anyone that challenges Putin, who is behaving more and more erratically and more like a czar, their days will be numbered. And oligarchs, Russian oligarchs, have been falling from high places. Former citizens, those who challenge authority, are poisoned or disposed of. It is medieval, the way that the Russian regime has operated now for years. And Putin is becoming more and more entrenched in the dark arts that he probably learned while a member of the KGB.
After this failed mutiny, I'm sure many people, including yourself, probably thought Mr. Prigozhin was essentially, he had a target. He was almost a dead man walking. But I'm curious, if Vladimir Putin allowed this individual to keep on living his life, I'm wondering what the optics would have done surrounding his leadership, and if that might have made him look weak, and might lead to speculation that this is why he might have done something to make sure that that's not the optics that the Russian people will have of him.
Yes, I think that's right. There was obviously a little bit of a reprieve where Prigozhin went to Belarus and essentially was given a pardon for the charges that were forthcoming for treason and attempting a coup. And yet it may be explained somewhat by the relationship that he had with Putin. They both had spent time together in their youth in St. Petersburg. Prigozhin was a street thug who did over 10 years in jail for petty robberies and theft. And Putin, of course, it took a different trajectory and wound up as the head of the Russian regime, as president. And so that relationship, and he was often described as Putin's chef. And then Prigozhin, of course, returned to his criminal ways. He headed this Wagner group, which is known for its brutality, its rapes and murders throughout the various missions that he led from Syria to Libya to parts of Africa, and then, of course, more recently in Ukraine. And so he was useful to Putin up to a point where he became a threat. And then, as we've seen with this air crash yesterday, which you said is still under investigation, but we may never know, then I think it becomes quite clear that Putin had to dispose of him the way he has with others who he deemed to be threats. Although politicians tend to be more jailed than killed, although we've seen examples of those assassinations as well. It really harkens back to a different time of lawlessness and the brutality, as I said, that Vladimir Putin has perpetrated throughout his time in office.
Peter, in prepping for our interview today, I reread an article that you wrote many years ago in 2017 for the National Post, and it's talking about it's time for Canada to get tough with Putin and his thugs. And I'm curious, given all that has transpired between Russia and Ukraine, how do you think governments around the world, including our government, are handling this situation when it comes to confronting this ruthless dictator?
Well, I think we've been quite lax, although We've taken some steps in recent years in terms of supporting Ukraine's ability to defend itself, although I still think there is more, much more that we could and should be doing. I think they should be removed from the Security Council at the UN. I think they should be kicked off other international boards. I think we need to have a full court press when it comes to marginalizing Russia. They are out of control, quite frankly, and are not going to rein any of this activity in the near term. And so, to that extent, I think we need to band together with international allies, those who are like-minded in the West, and do everything we can to limit Russia's ability to have the type of lethal impact that they've been having, both inside and outside their own country. They've jailed any sort of political dissidents inside their country, including a good friend of mine, Vladimir Kara-Murza. We've seen other political leaders locked up or disposed of. Boris Nemtsov was assassinated just steps from the Kremlin as an opposition leader. They've jailed and disposed of just about anyone who would be a threat to Putin's power,
including Alexei Navalny as well. Peter MacKay, we appreciate your time as always. Thanks for joining us on CP24. It's good to chat.
Thank you, Jamie.